thank you so much for being here today. My name is Lauren Hurl, and I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Natural Resources Council, VNRC. VNRC has led the way as a key protector and defender of Vermont's environment since 1963. But today, on this Earth Day, we are gathered together at a moment when the Trump administration is undertaking an aggressive assault on our right to breathe clean air, drink clean water, and leave a livable planet for our children and grandchildren. These threats are part of a broader effort to subvert our democracy and fundamental human rights. Earth Day is an annual celebration of activism, which began back in 1970, inspired by events like the devastating Santa Barbara oil spill, and at a time when rivers were literally catching on fire and air pollution was choking our cities. The first Earth Day in 1970 was bipartisan and broadly popular. It brought out an estimated 20 million Americans, 10% of the country's population at the time. For more than 50 years, we've been working to improve the health of our communities with better regulation of pollution and the transition to cleaner technologies such as renewable energy. But now we have a federal administration that's looking to bring us back to the days where corporations could pollute unchecked to maximize their profits at the expense of our health and our communities. Recent Trump administration actions include rolling back regulations on toxic air and water pollution. Just yesterday, they announced they were cutting grants to protect children from toxic chemicals. At a time when clean energy is the cheapest and fastest source of electricity to bring online, and while families and businesses are struggling with energy costs, they're doing everything they can to ban cheaper clean energy, and instead are doubling down on old-fashioned, expensive, and polluting technologies like coal. They're closing all environmental justice offices around the country, leaving our most vulnerable communities to face increased exposure to dangerous contamination. They're decimating the staffing at federal agencies that work to ensure clean air, clean water, the safety of our food, the operations of our national parks, healthy national forests and wildlife, and on and on. So even those protections that don't get gutted will not have the staffing or expertise they need to ensure our laws are actually being enforced. They're also weaponizing the government by making baseless attacks on civic institutions that they don't agree with. And they're threatening our democracy, which underpins our ability to work together for a healthy environment for all. Meanwhile, at the state level, at a time when we should be shoring up our environmental laws, the Scott administration is primarily proposing bills to weaken state laws like the Global Warming Solutions Act and Renewable Energy Standard. While these attacks on our health, communities, and institutions are daunting, we know Vermonters care deeply about our environment, and there's a lot we can do to fight back. Vermonters are already stepping up to make their voices heard by taking to the streets, calling their elected officials, writing letters to their local papers and on online forums. They are on the front lawn of the State House today rallying for Earth Day, and we have state lawmakers that are standing strong to fight against rollbacks to environmental laws. And we wanted to bring together some of Vermont's statewide leaders this Earth Day to share some highlights of the courageous and critical work they are doing to protect our environment and our democracy. By using the variety of tools available, there's a lot we can do to protect Vermonters, and I'm so grateful for the leadership we have here with us today. I'll first turn it over to Vermont Attorney General Charity Clark.
First of all, happy Earth Day. When you elected me your Attorney General, you gave me the power to represent Vermont in court. And when the Trump administration violates the Constitution or federal law, I will be there. I have sued on behalf of Vermont to uphold the Constitution and federal law. And in these 3 months, I have sued the Trump administration 9 times. Thank you. In addition, in cases where we weren't the person who sued, the state was not the best person to sue, we also joined what's called amicus briefs, or friend of the court briefs, and we have joined 19 of those. In this moment, I am proud to represent Vermont, Vermont's values, and our laws. I want to talk in particular about a recent executive order, the so-called Protecting American Energy from State Overreach Executive Order, which specifically targets Vermont and a couple of other states regarding our efforts to combat the devastating impact of climate change. It is yet another attempt to undermine states' sovereignty, a theme that we have seen with the Trump administration. There is, as a preliminary, there is no national energy emergency, and in fact, American energy production is at an all-time high. State laws are not a threat to American energy. The executive order uses quotation marks to suggest that climate change and greenhouse gases aren't real. This is absurd. We actually got a chuckle over that in my office. Vermonters know firsthand, particularly given the events of the past couple of summers, that climate change is indeed real and that the impacts here are an existential threat. Vermont has taken that threat seriously and acted to address it, and I will continue my work to protect and defend that action. I do not favor a wait-and-see approach. Vermonters roll up our sleeves and get things done, and that is what my office and fellow attorneys general across this country are doing. In my travels around the state, I have heard repeatedly from Vermonters that they feel reassured when they hear the work of my office, and so let me take a moment to say it is important to remember that many, if not most, of the president's executive orders actually do not do anything. They are merely words. They often restate campaign promises, or they will direct an official in his office to do something. Basically, it's an email in executive order format. There are many, many executive orders, but many of them literally don't do anything. There isn't even a way for us to sue because they do so little. So please keep that in mind. And let me also offer an historical note. Trump was president before, and during that time, my office sued 62 times. Roughly half of those lawsuits involved the environment. First of all, we prevailed in 60 of those lawsuits, but also we haven't seen a lot of activity in executive orders relating to the environment. I want to reassure you that although so far that has not been the main focus like it was during the first Trump administration, when that happens, I will be there for Vermont. My office will continue to analyze each and every single executive order and action taken by the president to make sure that it is constitutional and complies with federal law. And I also want to say we will continue to look for opportunities to support other lawsuits to make Vermont's voice and position known on issues that impact our state through the form of those amicus briefs and friend of the court briefs. Thank you very much for having this opportunity to speak to everybody, to mark Earth Day, this incredibly important day, and especially for Vermont, which I truly have seen with my own eyes across political spectrum supports the environment and our wonderful outdoors and natural resources. So thank you.
Thank you, Attorney General Clark, for your leadership. We're so grateful. Next, we're going to hear from Vermont Secretary of State Sarah Copeland Hanzas.
So the link between climate and environment and a healthy democracy has never been more important than it is today. In this Earth Day 2025, we are seeing unprecedented attacks against our democracy by this administration. From the unfunding and the gutting of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency that provides critical protections for our election systems from attacks either internal to the United States or from foreign actors, to the SAVE Act and the executive order requiring everyone to show documentary proof of citizenship in order to maintain their spot on the voter registration rolls. These are unwise, unprecedented, and egregious attacks on our democracy. Why is that important on Earth Day? Well, I'm going to tell you about the 18 years that I spent in the Vermont House and how it became increasingly important that if we wanted to make progress on climate, we needed to go out to Vermonters and explain clearly what we want to do, what we're trying to accomplish, and how we're trying to accomplish it. And then we needed to ask those Vermonters to give us a clear message that we should be focused on climate. Our caucus in the House and the Senate is called the Climate Solutions Caucus. It is solutions oriented. It is looking for ways that a rural state can make progress on reducing its climate harming emissions. And the Climate Solutions Caucus is still in existence and is still working to advocate for defending the Renewable Energy Standard and defending the Global Warming Solutions Act. These were battles that were hard fought, and the link between the voters of Vermont and our ability in the legislature at that time to pass that legislation is very clear. So I am really proud to be your Secretary of State, and as your chief elections official, it is my job to defend our democracy and to make sure that it is working for all Vermonters so that people can register to vote, can access their ballot, and have the information that they need in order to cast that ballot. And I will continue to do that by pushing back against the SAVE Act, by advocating for sustainable funding for the cybersecurity infrastructure that we need in this country to keep our elections safe and secure. And I am proud on this Earth Day to welcome you all to stand up with your legislators in the House and the Senate and continue to defend the work that we've done to protect our environment in Vermont and globally. And I thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Madam Secretary of State, for your longtime leadership on environmental and democracy issues. And I am happy to introduce next our Treasurer, Mike Pieciak.
Well, good morning, everybody, and happy Earth Day. Thank you all for all the advocates, all the individuals that are here today. Thank you for all your work protecting the Vermont environment and all your work over the decades. Your dedication is certainly appreciated, and your efforts now are more necessary than ever. So thank you for being in the State House. Today is really more than just a celebration of our planet. As I said, it's really a call to action. Here in Vermont, where our mountains, our rivers, our forests and farms define both our identity and also our economy, that call is especially urgent. As State Treasurer, I spent a lot of time thinking about long-term investments, and there is clearly no investment that's more critical than making sure we protect our environment here in Vermont. A healthy environment isn't just simply a Vermont value, it is the Vermont advantage. It's the reason why people visit Vermont. It's the reason why people decide to make their home here in Vermont. It's something that powers our outdoor recreation economy. It's something that powers our $4 billion tourism industry. So it's a critical thing that we support, and it's why our office has continued to take concrete steps to align our financial strategies with our environmental values. Through our 10% in Vermont program, we've invested over $20 million into municipalities that were impacted by the flooding in 2023 and 2024 so that they can build back in a more resilient way, that their communities can be better protected by the ravages of climate change. In our office, we've invested millions of dollars so that we can create more green energy across Vermont, and municipalities can be more energy efficient as well. We've also invested tens of millions of dollars into new housing that's both affordable and compatible with our environment, built in our downtowns, villages, centers, and cities. We've also brought together leaders from across the country to ensure Vermont is the leading conversation in how governments, financial institutions, communities can all work together to build a sustainable future. We work together with state treasurers from across the country to make sure we use the power of our money to have influence on the ways corporations are impacting our environment. And this past year, Vermont made history by passing the first in the nation legislation that holds big oil accountable for its role in the climate crisis. The Climate Superfund Act, which many of you in this room have championed and supported, has a very simple principle. If you cause the harm, you should help pay to repair it. Because Vermont is being so hurt by climate change, the urgency of our action is more important now than ever. Vermont is the 7th in the country in the last 15 years in terms of the number of major disaster declarations that have been declared in the country. Not 7th per capita, 7th in an aggregate, in an absolute number across the country. And we're fourth per capita in the amount of federal funding we've had to receive from the federal government to build back from these climate disasters. The call is more important now than ever. And I think it's more important now than ever also when you think about the day-to-day chaos that's coming from the federal administration in Washington, D.C. There's an emergency, there's a crisis, and there are important emergencies and crises for us to spend our attention on. But every single day there's an emergency and a crisis, while at the same time, the crisis from climate change continues to loom in the background, and we can't take our eyes and attention off of that as well. So the work is just beginning here in Vermont. I know together we will be able to accomplish a greener future, a more sustainable future that benefits both our values, our communities, and also our economy. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Treasurer Pieciak. Next, we're going to hear from Senate President Pro Tem Phil Barruth on what the legislature has been doing to stand up.
Thank you. I just wanted to start with a thank you and some applause for the advocacy groups that are here today, Paul's group, Lauren's group, and all the others. Every day is Earth Day for them, so please, a round of applause. To be clear, in the White House, we have an administration and a group of cabinet officials who are intent on a slow motion looting of our treasury. I think we've all seen that in just the last few months. But just looting what is there is not enough. They are also looking at clearing away all of the environmental regulations that have been put in place since the 70s, since the Nixon administration. So just one example, they just pushed a rule change to say that endangered species are not harmed if their habitat is entirely destroyed. Harm would constitute killing the animals themselves directly, but if you destroy their habitat, they are not harmed legally. Now, that shows you the up is down, down is up philosophy that we will get from Washington. Our mantra here, and I believe the Attorney General used these words, is protect and defend. So we have done amazing work over the last 3 years. I'll just give you a sense of that. We passed, among other things, the Climate Superfund, the Flood Safety Act, the Pollinator Protection Bill, S-25 banning toxic forever chemicals, and then the last two examples, community resilience and biodiversity protection, and I also talked about our help for the bees. All of those things were groundbreaking, as is the Renewable Energy Standard and the Global Warming Solutions Act. All of those things are under attack, every single one of them. We do not any longer have the votes to override the governor. That was the voters' decision. But the voters also said, we want you in the majority, and we take that as a message to defend to the death everything we have passed in the last 10 years. So thank you for your help in that work, and we will continue.
Thank you, Senator Barruth. And Vermont really has been at the forefront, passing some of the most ambitious, important environmental laws in the country, and we're so grateful for the leadership. We are going to hear a brief statement that Speaker of the House Jill Krowinski sent over. She was disappointed not to be able to join us, but wanted to share brief remarks.
Thanks. I'm Dan Fengus, Executive Director of the Vermont Conservation Voters. I want to make sure that legislative climate champion Speaker Jill Krowinski's words get added to this as she's still on the floor. She says, Earth Day isn't just a date on the calendar, it's a call to action. A reminder that our health, the environment, is the foundation of our communities, our economy, and our future. In Vermont, we know this better than most. Our state is built on a deep respect for nature, and we have a lot to celebrate when it comes to protecting our fields, forests, and waterways. But our work is far from done. Climate change is real, and its impacts are already being felt, from unpredictable winters to flooding that threaten our towns. That's why we must lead, as we always have, with bold ideas, local solutions, and a commitment to protecting what we love. We need clean energy, not just for the planet, but for good-paying jobs. We need to preserve our forests, not just for beauty, but for our carbon capture and wildlife. And we must ensure every Vermonter, no matter their zip code, has access to clean air, clean water, and a healthy future. On this Earth Day, let's recommit to our environment, not just in words, but in action. The decisions we make today shape the Vermont we hand to the next generation. Thank you, and let's keep Vermont green today and every day.
Thank you. And our last speaker is Paul Burns, Executive Director of VPIRG, one of the leading champions for our environment.
Thanks, Lauren, and thanks to all of the speakers that we have here today, our statewide electeds, pro tem, the words from the speaker. This doesn't happen every place, to see leadership like we have behind us here, and the leadership that we have had in the House and in the Senate that have gotten so many of those important victories passed that Senator Barruth mentioned. So once again, many thanks for those folks who are here. Now look, I must tell you that I am not frequently quoting President Richard Nixon at public gatherings, but today I make an exception. The first Earth Day took place in 1970 during Nixon's first administration. And even before Earth Day that year, during his State of the Union address, Nixon had some, you might say, very progressive words, things to say about the importance of cleaning up and protecting our environment and our precious natural resources. I'm going to 2 paragraphs of quote. He said, "Restoring nature to its natural state is a cause beyond party and beyond factions. It has become a common cause of all the people of this country. It is a cause of particular concern to young Americans because they, more than we, will reap the grim consequences of our failure to act on programs which are needed now if we are to prevent disaster later. We can no longer afford to consider air and water common property, free to be abused by anybody, without regard to the consequences. Instead, we should begin now to treat them as scarce resources, which we are no more free to contaminate than we are free to throw garbage into our neighbor's yard." End quote, Richard Nixon. On the first Earth Day 55 years ago, the fight for healthy air, clean water, open spaces, and endangered species was a unifying message. Today, those who carry the torch of leadership on these issues are attacked and maligned by a president and a party who seem hell-bent on destroying our children's future. Well, I've got news for the president and for any of his allies here in Vermont on this Earth Day. We're not giving up on protecting the environment, our health, or our future, and we will never give in. Thank you.
Thank you again for all of our state leaders for joining us and all that you are doing every day to not give in and keep fighting for our environment and a healthy Vermont. And we are now happy to take questions. We said it all.
What do you think is one of the more pressing environmental issues that you're most concerned about with the Trump administration?
Well, from my perspective, it's really tied back to that support we get from the federal government. This is for a Vermont-specific impact relative to FEMA. You know, we have significant monies that are awaiting reimbursement. If we have another flood, we'll be highly dependent on the federal government to help us rebuild and recover. As I mentioned, we're 4th highest per capita when it comes to the amount of federal money that's come to Vermont over the last 15 years. And the president himself has a lot of discretion and authority whether to declare a major disaster declaration. So as we look ahead over the next 4 years, let's knock on wood, but the likelihood of a climate disaster impacting communities in Vermont is quite high. And we need the federal government to be there as a partner for us to rebuild and build back better.
Is it pretty clear to you that a lot of the money that FEMA promised, maybe a better word, isn't going to come?
Well, it's uncertain, which is the key word of the Trump administration, uncertainty. There are a lot of communities that we talk to that are worried about their reimbursement from FEMA. We made investments to those communities. There were loans. We, at the time when we made those loans, said if we're making a loan to a municipality that's backed by the federal government, there's no better investment that we could make. And we have a very different opinion on that just a couple of years later.
Can I layer onto that, Bob? I totally agree with Mike, but you asked about, I think, more results, but I want to highlight the violation of due process, the violation of the rule of law, the violation of norms, of federal laws. I mean, Congress gets to decide a lot of things, and the Trump administration has decided it wants to decide those things. So those violations are also a risk because we have laws in place that protect the environment and protect Vermont, and those are being violated along with the norms and the rule of law that go along with it.
So, Charity, does the Supreme Court decision at midnight, Friday night, give you hope that the court will stand up and support the issues you care about?
Yes, but that feeling has not wavered for me since the beginning of this. I really believe in the judicial process, and I believe that even lawyers who fundamentally disagree with my view of the world, most of their decisions, I think, will adhere to the rule of law. And I think we've continued to see that among judges who are appointed by Democrats, appointed by Republicans, and I sincerely hope, and I hope I'm right, that we will continue to see that.
I just want to say one more thing there, Bob. When you think about the greatest threats to our environment, it is also the greatest threats to healthcare, the greatest threat to education, the greatest threat to housing. It is an attack on our civil society and on democracy that we are seeing from this administration being enabled by this Congress right now. Many of us are aware that this is a day where we have heard that the president may issue one or more executive orders attacking nonprofit organizations in this country, perhaps declaring that work in the area of climate or environmental protection no longer qualifies as charitable work. He may go after specific institutions, nonprofit organizations that have worked to protect the health of our people, of our environment, of our economy, in the way that he's going after Harvard right now. And this is an abuse of our system. It is an attack on our civil society. And that, I think, is in many ways the greatest threat to our work to protect the environment and the people of this country.
Are the lawsuits prepared to protect the environmental groups?
I'm guessing yes.
Would any of the speakers like to address whether and to what extent some Republican leaders in the state of Vermont have been raising hurdles, creating hurdles for greater environmental progress in the last 5, 6, 10 years, or whether you feel the threat is solely from Washington?
Thank you, Kevin. I would say that following the election in November, there was a flurry of activity, interest in repealing many of the bills that I mentioned earlier. There has not been a great deal of follow-up on that, and I take that as a sign that the stronger minority has looked at those laws and the support for them, and in some cases decided to pull back. That's a hopeful reading, and we will see between now and the end probably some action on those fronts. But I think, especially in light of what the Trump administration is doing, Republicans here in Vermont don't necessarily want to be associated with that wholesale attack on the environment.
I have a question about agriculture. In my world, I'm seeing NRCS gutted, FSA. I'm worried about our conservation districts. If we're going to do anything to stop this terrible flooding disaster, it's going to be upstream. And those organizations with UVM have what it takes to lead us in that. And I'm asking, what can we do to support them and perhaps bring our Agency of Agriculture to the forefront of that work?
I'll just talk a little bit about the work that we've been doing, and this was cooperative work with the administration from our office to design a climate resiliency strategy for the future of Vermont. You know, climate resilience is a really important part of our climate response here in the state. because the climate crisis is here at our doorstep. It's impacting our farms, our businesses, our communities. So this climate resiliency strategy would be a blueprint to how we make important investments, how we prioritize those investments, and how do we finance or fund those investments over the next decade and beyond. So originally we anticipated having that published this summer. Our hope is that we can still have that out this summer. And again, it would be a good blueprint and a good path forward for a lot of the issues that you're talking about.
Thank you.
You asked what you can do, and I want to tell you, you're doing what you can do. You showed up today, and I think everyone is listening. When people are protesting, when people are writing to their elected officials, when they're putting things, letters to the editor, when they're writing on social media, people are seeing you and they're listening to you. So keep it up. You're doing a great job.
Other questions? All right. Thank you all so much.